Cool. So this is SIG-cluster-lifecycle on Friday the 23rd of June 2017. And this is the smaller group that we've been having on Fridays in order to dig into the specific implementation details for self-hosting, upgrades, and HA. We delayed the start of the meeting slightly for Tim to join, but we're going to get started now, and hopefully he'll join us soon.
So I will mention, before we started recording, we talked briefly about component statuses for HA, and we linked a couple of issues in the notes. We didn't make any decisions or anything, so the notes sort of capture where we're at. And then the first agenda item is to follow up on action items from last week's meeting. There were 3 action items. We'll start with Lucas's because he'd marked it as done in the previous meeting notes, which was to update the checklist in KubeAdmin issue number 127. So that's the self-hosting issue. Do you want to give any updates on that, Lucas, or should we go to the other 2?
Let me see what I wrote down there. Well, first of all, make self-hosting work and split out the phase and use daemon sets. I have a pull request for that. We'll rebase now that the code freeze is lifted, and hopefully we can get it merged sometime next week. Upload certificates to the API using secrets. Andrew, an external contributor, volunteered to do that and already sent a PR in mid or early 1.7 cycle. Unfortunately, it was a bit controversial, and we hadn't really any clear decision making at the time to move forward between SIG and our group, so it stalled out. I talked to him, and he will rebase the PR once mine is in, and then propose a create first then delete daemon set update strategy, and then we can use that strategy for the controller manager and scheduler daemon sets, which was another action item we'll come to. Write a kubelet checkpointing proposal and opt in to that for KubeADM. So basically touches the 2 other action items.
Cool. And I can touch on those. So I sent Eric Toon a private message to ask him how he'd feel about that. He started a discussion, which unfortunately is internal to Google. We should definitely move that over to like the public SIG mailing list. But right now he's just kind of feeling out information. And his last ask was whether we were impacted at all by the proposal to switch the daemon set to use the regular scheduler instead of just bypassing the scheduler and scheduling things itself, which I don't believe impacts this ask at all. I think that's sort of orthogonal. I think that everything will still just continue to work. What we want is the daemon set controller to create before deleting, regardless of how the scheduler schedules things. Right? The scheduling isn't too important to us. There's another issue about taints that we actually do care about, but where the scheduler runs, I think we care less about.
Yeah, I think so too. In any case, they can't break backward compatibility when like moving the scheduler or the daemon set controller over to using the scheduler to schedule.
Right.
Right. So it's not that important to us. We rely on the current behavior and expect it to be the same in the future as well.
Right. So I view switching it over to using the scheduler is blocked on the issue you opened 45717 in the main repo, which is to support scheduling tolerating workloads on not ready nodes, because the daemon set controller currently does do that. So we need the regular scheduler to have the same behavior, at which point it'll work fine for us. So that's where that is. I'm going to follow up on that thread. I'll probably just open a GitHub issue and link to it from where we are, and we can hash out the details there. But I'm trying to. The reason I started it internally was I'm trying to get it on someone at Google's agenda work list for next quarter and for the 1.8 cycle. So I thought that would be a more effective way to do that. I don't think Tim's here yet, and I haven't seen a proposal be put together for pod checkpointing. But I'll also mention that I talked with Dawn a couple of days ago and sort of verbally explained what I thought we were doing. And she agreed that that would be fine. and said that for SIG node, it's on their roadmap as a P1 item. So it's a little bit inconsistent with our P0 priority for this task. But SIG node has a whole bunch of P0 things. And she has been told by her management that they had too many P0 things and they had to bump something to P1. So ours is a P1. I don't think that means it won't get done. They seem to have a pretty good track record of delivering the things that they sign up for. And especially if we're doing implementation and just asking for review bandwidth, I think it will be fine to get in. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. We should get the actual proposal sort of written up and codified so everyone is sort of really on the same page with where we're headed. But I don't see any sort of major roadblocks or pushback in terms of sort of conceptually where we're headed. So I think we're in pretty good shape there.
Cool. Yeah, and follow up from the first time. Follow up from the first time. We basically talked mostly about self-hosting. More that what is the scope for self-hosting and its control plane in the first place. Kubelets won't be affected at all. And the checkpointing thing, which is now going to be built into kubelet. One action item which I probably could do is the issues with using the schedule, like the issues with using a deployment instead of a daemon set. And there's a lot of complexity in there. So I could do a workflow diagram if that's useful. Like, what's the actual problem with using daemon deployments? But since we've agreed on using daemon sets, I don't know if it's a priority right now. But that was one thought. And then we didn't get that far into upgrades or HA at all, but stated that the phases is a documentation / clarification and effort, and is important in the way that we have to basically get an understanding what we're doing before we starting to build out any more things. I already wrote the doc for that, what kubeADM is doing now, and we'll reiterate on that one as we agree on upgrades and HA design later. So I think that's in pretty good shape. And a stretch goal for 1.8 is to actually expose these phases and API in a correct manner for other external consumers like Kops, Cargo, and Jiki. So that, but a stretch goal. So yeah, I think that was what wasn't said last week, but what we talked about a little that first time.
Hey, Aaron, welcome.
Hey, sorry, I thought this was 10:30 for some reason. Sorry about that, guys.
Well, it is now. It's all good. We're also actually waiting for Tim to join us. He says that he'll join us imminently, so that's fine. We already got started though. Does anyone want to? Actually, we should probably just wait for Tim to join, and then we can bring both Tim and Aaron up to speed at the same time. But please proceed with whatever you're talking about, Lucas.
Okay. Yeah. So if we get started on a little bit on upgrade, I think we all agree that the kubeADM upgrade command will just talk to a controller of some kind or post a custom resource definition or post a custom resource of some kind, or in another way inform a controller that you should upgrade this cluster. I think we all agree on that, but are we on the same page? Instead of having like the logic built into kubeADM, and you always have to have if you have kubeADM 1.8.1, you can upgrade from 1.7 to 1.8.1, but not to 1.8.2. But if you have a controller, it's can be independently released.
You can upgrade the upgrader. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of that. I think that makes sense to me. Maybe you could just explain something though. When you say like talking to a controller, presumably you mean via the API server, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Aaron, does the etcd operator, is that something that's always running in the cluster, or is that something you launch as like a job where it runs sort of to completion to do its current task and then it's not running after that?
The etcd operator always runs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really the operator in the controller sense, right?
For our upgrades right now, we run the thing that manages upgrades constantly in the cluster, but it's actually not doing a constant reconciliation loop right now. It kind of is like you trigger it and it runs the upgrade, but just kind of sitting there all the time. Kind of gone back and forth in cases where we might want it to actually constantly run in the cluster, like if you have nodes joining at old versions or something like that, bringing them back up to date, but it could go either way.
Yeah, in terms of, there's been some discussions with the 1.7 release about resource usage. I'm just wondering if, from a resource usage point of view, if it's not doing constant work, if it makes sense to keep it constantly running.
Well, I mean, it's the thing that's going to, like, if a member goes down, it's going to replace that member. So you kind of want it sitting there watching your etcd cluster.
I see. Okay. So for our upgrade purposes, though, that's not true, right? We don't need something constantly watching to make sure there are, 2 schedulers running or, 2 controller managers running, because the control plane should be doing that for itself.
I do like the idea of being able to upgrade nodes that went away and then came back, though. But maybe
But kublets are out of scope for this, right?
To start with, yeah.
I guess I mean masters. Sorry, I should have been clearer with my language. By node, I just meant computer. I mean, is there maybe this is a detail that we don't need to go into right now, but like if you had a 5 master cluster and only 4 of the masters were up when you start the upgrade, does the upgrade controller just wait until the 5th one comes back? How does it know how many masters there were meant to be?
So I might be a little bit behind on this discussion, but when I think of upgrading the masters, I'm pretty much just think of upgrading like the manifests for the components for the API server scheduler controller manager. And so it shouldn't hypothetically matter how many masters there are. You're saying.
I think the same. So it's basically about.
You're just writing to etcd.
Yeah. It's basically about rewriting the things we care about, and Cube will take care of the rest.
Right, and I think that's why it's a lot easier to do the control plane than it is to do the kubelets, right? Because the control plane is, you just update the system definition of what the control plane is, and then the system reconciles and updates the control plane for you.
Makes sense.
And that the other nice thing about that is that should be deployment independent. So updating the kubelets is going to depend on how you deployed your cluster, right? Whether it's on bare metal or on a cloud, you're going to have to sort of take a different strategy, potentially different based on the host OS also. Whereas the control plane should be able to have the upgrade process, whether it's something on operator or something else, be completely the same regardless of where you're deployed.
Yeah,
So
that's nice. I mean,
the way I think of upgrades is sort of in 2 steps. One step is upgrade the control plane, which all of our documentation says you should do first. That's the way we test, so it's probably smart to do that first. And that step can be done the same everywhere. And then when you want to go upgrade your nodes, you're going to have to do something specific for your environment. So we still may be able to create automation and upgrade operators for nodes, but we're going to have more variants. We're either going to have that be pluggable, or you can like plug in implementation bits to talk to different cloud providers, or we're going to have different sort of node upgrade operators depending upon your deployment.
Yeah, so one really hacky thing that comes to mind for upgrading nodes is, I mean, there's potential to use jobs or daemon sets of some kind temporarily, and NSenter into the host host namespaces and such things, but I don't think we'll go that way. But I mean, it's technically possible, but I really think it's out of scope for this.
You're fighting the package manager at that point. You don't want to do that. Package managers might be like, hey, I checked that the SHA-1 hash of all my binaries matches up every night at midnight, and if it doesn't, then I reboot.
But I meant like actually running apt-get upgrade and yum, like apt-get update upgrade and or yum update. I think that's actually possible, but I'm not saying we should do it.
I can speak a little bit to how we've been doing it, which it actually works. It's pretty simple and works pretty well, and the pattern would have to change based on the underlying host OS, but essentially you deploy an agent to all the nodes via a daemon set, and that agent is just looking at its own node object for annotations that say this is the kubelet container image URL and tag, and then when that gets changed, the agent just writes that to an environment file that a kubelet.service unit is consuming, and then essentially that it just runs the kubelet either via Docker or via Rocket. But it actually works pretty well because essentially you're just saying download this new container image, restart the kubelet, and it comes back up, and the agent is like 100 lines of code just watching its own node object. It's not that crazy, and it works pretty well. It could change instead the agent, instead of updating a systemd unit, it does apt-get install a new kubelet and then restarts it, but it works pretty well.
Cool. Sounds plausible as something to tackle later. I mean, I've always been of the opinion that the thing that installs things should be responsible for upgrading them, just as a general rule. So the thing that installs the kubelet is the package manager, and so it should be is a human using the package manager or a config management system using the package manager. And so it should be that same thing that is responsible for upgrading it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Well, but I think the way Aaron described it, the package manager is still responsible for doing it, but the automation system that kicks in to execute that command is itself run by Kubernetes.
Yeah, and that's
that out of band using Puppet or Chef or something else to sort of reach around behind the system and run apt-get upgrade. You use a daemon set effectively to run apt-get upgrade for you when you want to upgrade.
Yeah, maybe we should talk to some users and find out what they want.
Yeah, that's always a good idea.
Saying things that people don't disagree with. Now we just got to go and do it. Okay.
So is there any other thing, like should we, for example, make the kube proxy daemon sets rolling upgradable? I think we probably should, but in that case, what should the policy be?
Yeah, we need to have a way to upgrade kube proxy, right? I mean, and any other sort of system daemons that are run as daemon sets, right? So if we're running fluentd as a daemon set, that needs to be upgradable as well. I don't know if we are doing that today, or if we allow users to just install that on top themselves.
Yeah, they can install it on top. We don't do it automatically, but it might be something we'll do when we have a proper add-on manager. So basically, I wrote down we'll go with the controller route pattern, controller pattern. kubeadm upgrade the CLI command. kubeadm upgrade will change / write a custom resource. The controller running in cluster will pick that change up and upgrade the control plane daemon sets.
What starts the controller that's running in the cluster?
kubeadm upgrade as well.
Okay. We should note that also, especially for sort of existing clusters. If kubeadmin init doesn't get this thing bootstrapped to start with, then somebody has to add it, right?
And yeah,
maybe kubeadmin init, when you're in self-hosted, should be adding this controller from the get-go. That's another option.
I'll write here installs/upgrades, or like, how should I put it? I mean, if we notice that there's an old version of the upgrade controller or something, if we, for example, use the latest tag or whatever, can we make sure it's always up to date in some way? Installs and.
Well, I don't think we should ever use a latest tag, but I think that kubedm upgrade could, I guess it could, like, I guess it's going to have to go and reach out to a container registry and list the tags or something to see which versions of the controller are available, maybe.
Or it can be built into the kubeadmin release. It could say, I know that these are the versions that I should use. There can be a map in there saying if your cluster's at this version, maybe I use a different version of the upgrade image.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if I don't know what to do, I'll just use the latest version of the upgrade image.
Yeah, that's smarter, actually. Because then, okay, so the user experience is that you upgrade kubeadmin first, and then you use kubeadmin upgrade to upgrade the upgrader to an upgrader that knows about.
So actually, I was thinking the other way around. So you don't have to upgrade kubeadmin to, like, for patch releases, for example. So the upgrader will take care of that. That's the benefit we get with having another controller and a CLI, but they talk the same language.
I think we should probably encourage the user to upgrade kubeadmin, the binary, every time they want to do an upgrade, so that we can actually ship updates to that code.
Yeah, I guess if we don't upgrade kubeadmin, how do we know which version of the upgrader to run in the cluster? I'm very leery of using a latest tag, right? Because there's lots of cases where that's very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kubernetes can't distinguish new versions. I mean, doesn't Kubernetes assume that tags are immutable?
I don't know. I think you can put pull policies on there that you pull always. In which case, if you use the same tag, you can get it to repull.
Okay, it's just gross though, because you don't actually know which version of the bits you're running.
Yeah, right. If you inspect your container and it says, oh, it's running, latest, you're like, well, what version is that actually, right? Is that latest as of 3 months ago or latest as of yesterday?
Yeah, and then you can get version skew across your machines if latest changes while you're doing an upgrade and all sorts of hell. So Lucas, I think we are going to have to upgrade kubeadmin before we upgrade anything, because we need to encode the tags for the upgrader in kubeadmin.
Is there any other way we could do it than hard coding? I mean, and not using the latest tag? Because I mean,
sure,
it's going to be, it's really painful to, before every new patch release is cut, we have a SIG-cluster-lifecycle person have to go and bump this tag, and the release team will have to reach out to us every time or do it themselves or something.
Well, the first thing that I said was that kubeadmin can know how to go and inspect the list of tags available on an image somewhere, or use some other convention to get a list of tags, maybe a text file on a web server or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, we don't necessarily have to cut a new kubeadmin for every release, every patch release just for this purpose, right? You can say something like, if you're running 1.7. something, then use this version. And if we cut new versions of 1.7, we just keep using that version. Whereas if we find a bug, we'll cut a new kubeadmin that says, okay, now it's not 1.7 anything, it's 1.7.0 through 1.7.4. But if you're at 1.7.5, you need this new version of the thing because we fixed a bug in it, and then we rev kubeadmin at that point. And that also divorces the kubeadmin release schedule from the main Kubernetes release schedule, which we kind of want to do at some point anyway.
That seems reasonable. But when you say 1.7. anything, how does kubeadmin know which versions are available to upgrade to, other than having it hard-coded in its source code?
I see what you're saying.
I mean, does that matter? If a user asks to upgrade to 1.9 and it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, do we just try to fetch it and it says, oh, no image exists for that?
Well, I'd like to be able to say upgrade to latest, as in not latest, but like give me the latest version of Kubernetes, or dry run, show me what the latest version of Kubernetes would be if I tried to upgrade to it. So I don't want to have to force the user to always know what version they want.
Yeah. I mean, our CI uses
that's really easy. It's
text file from GCS. Right,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I think what Lucas is saying is the same thing, right?
Kubernetes IO, like release latest DXC. So that's actually already built in Kubernetes. Like you can say Kubernetes version latest, and it will fetch the thing if you have an internet connection.
Does it do that by branch, Lucas, or just
like
grab the latest
one?
Yeah,
1.7. Cool. Yeah, so latest it can be any alpha, beta, or C version, or it can be like a branched latest or stable. So I think we can definitely build in that one. That's really easy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe a little better than inspecting tags. Because with tags, you can't tell if the highest number tag is actually a stable release or if it's just a higher number tag, right? Because there are times where like we'll cut, 165 and it's got some bug and we tell people don't actually use that, but we did cut it. And then we cut 166 right afterwards, right? So I think just relying on the semantic version number being higher is not safe enough.
Okay, and is there one of these text files on GCS?
I agree.
Of the for each of the branches, as in 17, 18, 19, etc. Okay.
Yes.
So is there a way of asking? Would there be? And I should probably actually, or someone should make a proposal for like what the CLI user experience should be for kubeadmin upgrade, because we're kind of flying blind until we have that. I did make a rough sketch on that. But for example, if we want to support like show me which upgrades are available as a CLI argument, then sure, we can look at the latest files for each branch, but do we want to, like, how do we enumerate the branches?
Right. Yeah, this kind of gets, like, just using those files. The files were put there for CI mostly, not for, like, to be an official API of necessarily type. And there, in GKE, we did have to build an API to make our command line support that sort of query, which is tell me which versions you support, right? And I don't know if we want to do something similar here for kubeadmin, where maybe in like the utility cluster, we host a simple service that just enumerates like here are some supported version numbers, and we can bump those numbers as new releases get cut. Or if we're leery of having people depend on this hosted service, right? I mean, there are definitely people that want to install from behind firewalls where they're air gapped.
So far, we don't force people to be on the internet, as long as the people who aren't on the internet know which images to pre-cache.
Yes.
And we jumped through an awful lot of hoops actually to make that work with the crypto. So
yeah, so that's where having it built into the binary gets you around that. Whereas if you're having to dynamically fetch things, then we have to figure out escape hatches.
Yeah, I'm still erring on the side of liking the just hard code it in the binary option better, because we might also want to special case things in kubeadmin in the future. We want to at least leave that open to ourselves in the future.
Yeah. It does increase, as Lucas was saying, our overheads though as releasing.
Yeah,
So we did We went through this
So,
where
but in the case of, yeah.
Sorry. We went through we were hard coding known versions into a binary for the same reason. We wanted it, like, we don't want this upgrade tool to upgrade to a version that we didn't know about, because there might be something that it has to handle in that version. So not just like an arbitrary, I'm going to upgrade to this new version and it might or might not work. There was a lot of overhead with that, to the point that it actually did become kind of painful, where we were constantly having to rebuild this tool and recompile it for essentially patch versions, and it didn't actually matter. We weren't adding in these custom things. So we kind of went half-half at this point. We allowed it to source from an external place, kind of migrating away from that. But I can see the value in both, but in practice, we haven't yet hit a case where it was like drastically unsafe to upgrade to a newer version than we knew about. But minor versions, that's the scary part.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I think for patch versions, that's probably pretty safe, but for minor versions, it's probably not.
Totally agree there.
Lucas,
yeah.
just to point out, I'm working on a PR that, if I remember well, was asked by Jacob, where we are giving in a pre-flight checks a warning when you are using, you are installing with kubemin a Kubernetes version which is much older than kubemin version. You did a review, if I remember well, too. There, in this PR, we are implementing a logic that prevent what Aaron was saying. So to use something which, to install a kubemin version with a controller which is much older than Kubernetes. So you risk a lot of unpredictable problems. Maybe that we can use the same logic there.
Yeah, so regarding the like kubeadm upgrades list available thing, I actually think we can rely on the latest and stable TXT. It has been around since version 1.0, and the API is dead simple with 2 files.
We don't want to depend on internet access to be able to upgrade clusters.
Yeah. I'm coming to it. And in the same manner as we say, I mean, in an air-gapped variant of kubeadmin now, you can't use the latest placeholder or stable. It will error out with saying you have to specify a Kubernetes version, otherwise I don't know what to install. And I think that's actually a fair compromise between both parties. If you want to upgrade to something and you have no internet access, you just have to tell kubeadm that I want to upgrade to this version. It might make sense anyway that you have to be specific with what version do I want to upgrade to. If I actually want to use if I don't care, I should still specify the latest stable or whatever label, and it will resolve to something from the GCS bucket. But still actually say it that I want the stable patch version of 1.6.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that. Seems like a reasonable compromise.
Then on the what upgrade a controller do I actually use? That's a little bit harder. But do you want to have the policy that kubeadm 1.8.4 can't upgrade to kubeadm Kubernetes 1.8.5? Do we want to have? I think we have to answer that question first.
I think like Aaron was saying, it's probably okay for that to work across patch releases, but it's scary to do that across minor releases. Like you wouldn't want kubeadmin 184 to upgrade you to Kubernetes 1.9. So it probably doesn't know enough about Kubernetes 1.9 and what's changed with the system to do that safely.
Yeah, I totally agree there. But can we like state that minor versions are fine, or patch releases are fine to upgrade? Like
most of the time, that should be safe. So I think sometimes we change things in patch releases that you might want the tooling to know about.
Yeah, but I actually think that what Robert said there then was really reasonable. Like we hard code the version that kubeadm should use, like the controller version tag that kubeadm should use. Like we're saying that we version 1 or whatever of the upgrader is hard coded into a 180, and first in like 184 we noticed that something has changed in the way we upgrade kubeadm clusters, that we have to rev a new upgrader, and then we say between 180 and 184 we use the version 1, and then everything above that version 2. And if we have to do the same thing more times, we can just like use the same pattern, and it will error out if you try to, if the client is 1.8 and you try to upgrade to 1.9.
So what is the actual scope of this upgrade? So are we just like flipping image fields on the manifest to use a new version? Are we managing the entire manifest or flags, or like what is kind of in scope here?
I think it's mostly about rewriting the flags. I think that's the main part, and like bumping the tag, of course, but then also take care of what flags have changed and what new do have to get added or something. I don't know.
So one option might be that the upgrade controller itself is just kind of built very generically, and it knows certain operations like apply these flags to this manifest, or change this image field of this manifest to perform an update. But the actual upgrade itself is just providing a payload that says, here are the new things that you need to know about. Here is like some JSON blob that's going to end up in this custom resource definition. And then that way you're not having to kind of rev the tool all the time. You're essentially just revving a payload that says, these are the things that you need to do to safely upgrade. And then the tool itself is fairly generic.
Sounds good to me as well. Yeah. So essentially saying that we should build it really generically and then put all the logic in the custom resource blob.
Well, I mean, ideally not necessarily business logic per se, but like what needs to change, like a declarative. If you can manage the entire manifest, that's the easiest, that's ideal. Your update payload would be like, here's your kubedns manifest, you need to apply this. And the code in the update operator is essentially just saying, oh, I've been given this manifest, I need to just apply it and wait for it to be applied. I'm going to update kubedns, I'm going to watch that deployment. Oh, look, it's done. Cool, I'll move on to the next component. In practice, you generally can't do that for most components, like manage the entire manifest, unless you're doing component templating. But there's probably some middle ground that we could find there. And then the code itself doesn't really need to change. You're just giving it declarative configuration in a JSON blob or something, and it applies it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Cool. Just a point of order. It's now the end of the scheduled time for the meeting, and I have to leave kind of soon for dinner. How does everyone else feel about knocking this on the head fairly soon?
Yeah, I got to go in 4 minutes.
Okay. Should we try and just reconvene same time next week and see if we can get Tim in the room as well at that point?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll write down that we'll upgrade. Patch releases are considered safe. Patch release upgrades. As a conclusion, and that means kubeadm CLI 185 can upgrade. Just so that we get the conclusions like that we talked about. Yeah.
Yep.
On paper.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and probably see you all on Tuesday or Friday next week. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Bye bye.